I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
The request reached Prince William only minutes after the palace confirmed that a sealed collection of Princess Diana's private letters had been uncovered. Meghan wanted access before the documents could be formally examined, arguing that some of Diana's words concerned Harry, the monarchy, and the family Meghan had entered. William read the request twice. Then, without negotiation or delay, he delivered an answer that changed everything. No. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The future king stood beside his desk, holding the demand as though it carried more weight than paper. The discovery had come from a locked archival case tied to Diana's private papers, a protected collection preserved away from public access. These were not routine notes. They came from some of her loneliest years and spoke of her sons, royal marriage, press pressure, and the future of the crown. William lowered the request onto the wood, removed his glasses, and told his private secretary, "The answer is no. These are my mother's words, not a weapon." His order was immediate. No copies, photographs, summaries, or briefings beyond the authorized archive team. The group permitted to examine sensitive royal records. Meghan felt the refusal as humiliation. She believed Diana may have written something meant for Harry's family, something the palace feared could change how the past was understood. Yet William's anger came from a different wound. Her request had arrived before Harry contacted him, and that silence forced the prince to wonder who was driving the demand. The timing felt too precise. The urgency felt too informed. Beneath his restraint, suspicion began to harden. The first sealed envelope carried a handwritten instruction from Diana, stating that certain pages should be read only when both her sons were ready to confront the truth together. The words struck William with force, because they transformed the letters from private memories into a final test between brothers. A second envelope appeared more dangerous. Its note warned of the damage that could follow if private pain were ever used to influence the monarchy from beyond its walls. He did not open it at once. He stared at the seal, aware that whatever lay inside could deepen old fractures or expose motives no one was prepared to face. Meghan reached the opposite conclusion. She became convinced that William had already seen enough to fear what she might discover. His refusal, meant as protection, now looked to her like concealment. But William's refusal was not simply about protecting paper. It was about protecting two brothers whose grief had never healed in the same way. For William, the letters belonged to a wound he had carried since childhood. For Harry, they represented a final chance to hear the mother whose absence had shaped nearly every decision of his adult life. For Meghan, they offered something even more powerful, possible proof that Diana had feared the same institution Meghan later accused of abandoning her. Three people now faced the same documents, but none approached them with the same heart. William remembered Diana as more than the princess adored by millions. She had been a frightened mother who sometimes trusted her eldest son with fears no child should have been asked to carry. The Prince of Wales, the formal title given to the monarch's direct heir, had spent years protecting those memories from becoming public property. Harry carried the same loss differently. He had repeatedly connected his pain, his marriage, and his departure from royal duties to the trauma of losing her so young. To him, the letters were not evidence. They were a final conversation he had been denied for decades. Meghan saw something else inside those sealed pages. She believed Diana had endured isolation, suspicion, and institutional pressure that echoed her own experience. That belief made the refusal feel personal, because the documents could affect Harry, their children, and the public story attached to their marriage. William feared that every painful sentence would be pulled into the conflict surrounding the Sussexes, turning his mother's private suffering into proof for a modern battle. Meghan believed he was already doing the opposite, using secrecy to control what Diana's life was allowed to mean. Harry called his brother before the anger could settle. His voice remained controlled when he asked whether the denial applied to him as well. William paused, choosing each word carefully, then said Harry would be allowed to read the letters in person, under private conditions, and without Meghan beside him. Silence followed. It was heavier than shouting. The future king understood immediately that his brother did not hear protection. He heard control. Catherine found William alone after the call, holding an old photograph of Diana. She did not interrupt him at first. When she finally asked what frightened him, he admitted the truth. He did not fear what the letters contained. He feared what the family might do to one another once those words were known. Catherine understood, because the damage would not stop with two brothers. It could reshape marriages, children, and the monarchy's future. Meghan gave Harry her own warning. Accepting those conditions, she said, would allow the palace to separate them at the exact moment they needed to stand together. Harry now faced a brutal choice between the woman beside him and the brother who guarded their mother's final words. That choice had not appeared overnight, because one earlier encounter had already convinced William that Meghan's interest in Diana's private words carried consequences far beyond grief. Months before the letters surfaced, a private conversation at Windsor had planted the fear now guiding William's decision. It began politely, almost harmlessly, with questions about Diana's journals and unfinished correspondence. Then Meghan asked one question too precisely, mentioning a phrase known only to a handful of people who had handled the princess's private effects. William did not challenge her that day, but he never forgot the moment, or the expression on her face. The letters had remained hidden because they were placed inside a secondary document case transferred between Diana's former household records and a protected royal archive, the secure system used to preserve sensitive family papers away from public access. Only a few senior custodians knew the case existed, and even they believed it held routine correspondence. No one expected deeply personal reflections. No one expected a warning that could reopen wounds between two sons. Meghan changed everything during a private tea at Windsor, after a family memorial discussion. She looked directly at William and asked whether Diana had ever written about the spare being forced to choose exile over obedience. The future king felt the room tighten around that sentence. He recognized the wording, because Diana's former correspondence secretary had once mentioned a similar phrase in a documented account, yet the original letter had never been released. Meghan noticed his suspicion and answered before he questioned her. She suggested Harry might have heard the words during childhood. But William watched his brother carefully, and Harry looked confused rather than reassured. That single reaction mattered, because it suggested the phrase had reached her through another path. It also confirmed the prince's deepest fear. Private information may already have escaped the family's control. William waited until the meeting ended. Then he closed the library door and asked Harry where Meghan had learned those words. His brother became defensive at once, accusing him of interrogating his wife, instead of listening to what she was trying to say. The argument did not explode, but something broke beneath it. Harry saw suspicion. William saw avoidance. Meghan, waiting beyond the room, understood that her question had struck a nerve. The future king later ordered a discreet review of Diana's uncatalogued papers, meaning documents that had never been fully sorted or formally recorded. He was not trying to expose Meghan. He needed to know whether private material had been circulating beyond approved hands. That search led archivists directly to the locked case and the letters now consuming the family. One archivist delivered the final shock in a confidential briefing. A seal on the case appeared to have been disturbed years earlier. Someone may have seen at least one document before the collection was secured. William said nothing, but suspicion hardened into certainty. And when Meghan finally confronted William about what he had denied her, the unanswered question of how much she already knew entered the room with her. The confrontation occurred without cameras, public statements, or advisors positioned between them. Meghan entered believing William could still be persuaded. William entered knowing the answer would not change. Between them lay Diana's memory, Harry's loyalty, and years of accumulated resentment. What began as a request for access became a battle over ownership, grief, and truth. And one sentence from Meghan finally broke the restraint William had carried into the room. William had agreed to the private meeting only after Harry urged him to explain the refusal directly rather than hide behind secretaries. The secure reception room was reserved for sensitive family discussions, meaning no staff member could interrupt or repeat what was said inside. Meghan began calmly. She argued that the letters might affect Harry's emotional well-being and reveal how Diana's younger son had been treated during the most painful years of his childhood. She insisted this was not curiosity, it was family. The tension broke when Meghan leaned forward and said, "You do not own her." The words landed like an accusation. She told William that controlling the archive had allowed him to control Diana's memory, deciding who could speak for her and who would remain outside. The future king answered with a coldness he had been fighting to contain. Diana, he said, was not an argument, a brand, a strategy, or a convenient parallel to be invoked whenever the Sussexes felt wronged. Meghan pushed her chair back and stood. William remained seated, placed one hand over the file, and held her gaze. "These letters will not leave this room under any circumstances," he said. The refusal should have ended the meeting. Instead, she revealed something that changed it completely. One letter, she said, referred to a future wife who could either heal the brothers' division or deepen it. William's expression changed at once. That wording had never appeared in the palace announcement, and only those with prior access could have known it. He asked who had shown her the sentence. Meghan refused to identify the source, arguing that the source did not matter if Diana's warning concerned her. But to the prince, the source was now everything. Her unexplained knowledge confirmed that someone had already crossed the boundary he was trying to defend. William closed the file with deliberate finality. He told Meghan that her refusal to explain what she knew had proven why unrestricted access could not be granted. She turned toward the door, anger replacing persuasion. Before she left, he said Harry could still read the letters under protected conditions. Meghan looked back and warned that her husband would never accept an invitation designed to exclude his wife. Yet Meghan had misjudged one crucial reality. William was not acting alone, and the authority behind his refusal had already been quietly secured. William's decision sounded personal, but the machinery behind it was larger than one wounded son. Before Meghan entered the room, legal custodians had already classified Diana's letters as protected family material. King Charles had been informed. Catherine had seen William's distress. Even Harry's possible access had been surrounded by conditions. The refusal was becoming more than a family boundary. It was becoming a test of who possessed the power to define Diana's final private legacy. The archival custodians reached their conclusion quickly. Diana's letters were private family material, not public state records, which meant they belonged to the personal side of royal history rather than the official papers of government. That distinction mattered because William and Harry held the strongest emotional claim, yet strict limits could still be placed on who viewed, copied, or repeated the contents. William used his authority as Prince of Wales, the title held by the direct heir to the throne, and as Diana's elder son to insist that no spouse, advisor, publisher, or media representative would examine them. King Charles received a confidential summary and understood the danger immediately. Selected lines could reopen Diana's suffering, revive old blame, and pull people into a public trial decades after they had lost the chance to answer for themselves. Charles stopped at one passage describing the collapse of her trust. The king set the pages down and said nothing. His silence carried regret, because those words reached back into a marriage that had wounded 2 sons and shaken the monarchy. Catherine confronted William with a quieter warning. She urged him not to let anger write the rules, reminding him that denying Meghan could not become the same as denying Harry. The future king admitted his deepest fear was not that Meghan would read the letters. It was that Harry would enter the room already convinced every painful sentence proved betrayal. Catherine understood that once grief became evidence, no brother could read with an open heart. A legal advisor then delivered the finding that weakened Meghan's position. Diana had left no instruction granting automatic access to future spouses. Marriage to Harry created emotional involvement, but not an equal right to private correspondence. Another sealed note carried a different command. Certain passages should be heard by both brothers together. To William, that instruction revealed Diana's true purpose. She had not wanted competing interpretations. She had wanted reconciliation. William authorized one final offer. Harry could return alone, sit beside him, and read the letters in full under protected conditions. Nothing could leave the room, and Meghan would receive no separate briefing. The offer reached California within hours, and Harry's reaction showed that the consequences of William's decision were already moving beyond anyone's control. Harry received William's invitation in silence. It offered him everything he had claimed to want: the chance to read his mother's hidden words, face his brother privately, and understand what Diana had left behind. But the conditions struck at the center of his marriage. He had to come without Meghan. Accepting could look like betrayal. Refusing could mean surrendering his final opportunity to hear Diana's voice without the world speaking over it. Harry read the letter at home, while Meghan watched his face change. William had created a path for his brother, but none for her. The terms were strict: no aids, no recordings, no written notes, and no public statement afterward. An aide was a trusted staff member who normally helped manage royal meetings, but this encounter would allow no one between the two men. That mattered because every word would belong only to them. It also meant neither could later hide behind advisors, briefings, or prepared explanations. Meghan understood the message immediately. She saw the invitation as an attempt to isolate her husband and restore the prince's influence through Diana. Harry saw something more complicated. He had imagined finding new words from his mother for most of his adult life, yet resentment still burned beneath that longing. William was offering access, but on terms that forced him to choose between his marriage and his grief. Harry folded the invitation once, then again, before placing it beside his untouched coffee. Meghan asked whether he intended to go. He could not answer. She pressed harder, saying William was using Diana to test his loyalty. He finally replied that refusing would also allow someone else to decide what their mother's words meant. The sentence cut through the room because both understood the truth beneath it. Silence could become another form of control. A confidential message arrived before either could speak again. It contained one copied sentence, attributed to Diana: "My boys must never let others turn their pain into opposing armies." Harry stared at the words and realized the archive had already been violated. Someone had seen the material. Someone had copied it. Meghan's earlier knowledge might have come from a leak, not instinct or a childhood memory passed down by her husband. Meghan denied arranging the message, but she refused to condemn whoever had sent it. She argued that secrecy had created the desperation that made leaking inevitable. Harry heard something dangerous in that defense. If every boundary could be broken in the name of truth, then Diana's privacy had already been lost. Harry finally told Meghan he would travel to Britain alone. He would not go to submit to William. He would go to hear his mother before more of her words escaped into the world. Harry's decision appeared to divide husband and wife, but behind the closed door of William's private room, it would instead force two brothers to face the wound beneath every accusation. No private secretaries entered with them. No lawyers remained to explain the rules. William and Harry sat on opposite sides of a small table with Diana's letters between them, looking less like royal rivals than two sons who had spent decades surviving the same loss in different ways. William broke the first seal. Harry recognized their mother's handwriting instantly, and the anger he had carried into the room began to tremble. William welcomed his brother without ceremony, and neither man tried to soften the moment with small talk. They agreed that one would read while the other remained silent, because interruption would turn confession into argument before Diana's meaning had been fully heard. The letters spoke first of royal responsibility, the burden of duty carried by those closest to the throne. But her deeper fear was not public obligation. She feared her sons would inherit the emotional divisions surrounding her marriage, her isolation, and the war over how her life would be remembered. Harry reached the passage written for the younger son and stopped. Diana had feared he might one day feel forced to escape in order to protect his sense of self. The words struck him with brutal force because they seemed to understand a choice he had spent years defending. William faced a different wound. Their mother admitted that she had sometimes leaned too heavily on her elder son, forcing him into the role of protector before he was ready. The future king lowered his eyes, because the sentence exposed the childhood burden beneath his adult control. Harry's hand began to shake as he held the page. William reached across the table and steadied the paper rather than touching him. He waited. No accusation followed. No victory appeared. Only grief remained between them. The most important letter carried the warning both had resisted for years. Diana urged her sons never to allow spouses, courtiers, journalists, or the institution itself to turn their pain into a contest over who had loved her more. Courtiers were the senior royal staff who managed palace life and protected the monarchy's interests, but her warning reached far beyond them. It included anyone who might use the brothers' sorrow to deepen division. Another passage made the truth impossible to twist. Diana had not predicted Meghan, condemned Catherine, or named a future villain. Her fear centered on the unresolved pain inside William and Harry themselves. Harry admitted that defending his mother had become inseparable from defending every choice he and Meghan made. William confessed that protecting her privacy had sometimes helped him avoid the anger and guilt he still carried toward his brother. Together, they agreed the letters would remain sealed from public exploitation, while each son could return for supervised private access whenever needed. Their agreement ended the battle inside the room, but outside it, one leaked sentence had already ignited a public storm that demanded its own answer. By sunrise, Diana's private warning had escaped the archive and entered every newsroom in Britain. The story was no longer simply that William had denied Meghan access. It was that the late princess had feared her sons would become opposing symbols in a conflict shaped by marriage, monarchy, and public judgment. The leak turned a family boundary into a national argument, and one front page captured the cruelty of the moment with devastating precision. Public opinion split almost instantly. One side believed William had defended Diana's dignity by refusing to let her private pain become material for another royal battle. The other believed Meghan had been excluded because the palace feared what she might find and how she might interpret it. Palace officials confirmed only that private family correspondence existed and that access would remain restricted. They refused to authenticate the leaked excerpt, meaning they would neither confirm nor deny that the published sentence came from Diana's own hand. One newspaper pushed the crisis beyond restraint. Its front page placed William and Harry on opposite sides of a torn image of their mother, beneath the headline, "Her last plea, do not let them divide you." The words struck the public because the fight over Diana's warning now seemed to prove the warning itself. Outside Kensington Palace, the London residents connected closely to William and Diana's memory. A crowd gathered beside the gates. People left white roses and handwritten cards asking the brothers to protect their mother rather than release more of her pain. A broadcaster read the leaked sentence during a live segment, then stopped before continuing. When he finally spoke, he framed the story not as Meghan against William, but as Diana's fear becoming reality through the struggle over who had the right to explain her. Meghan felt publicly cast as the outsider who had deepened the brothers' division, even though the letters never named her or blamed any future wife. Her silence became its own burden. William reacted with fury, but he refused demands for a public investigation. He knew that hunting the source in full view would turn the letters into an even larger spectacle. Harry then issued a concise written statement, confirming that he and his brother had read the correspondence together and jointly agreed to protect their mother's private words. Meghan did not challenge him. In private, she understood that opposing the statement would place her against both sons and against the meaning of Diana's warning. The palace ended the crisis with a formal announcement. No excerpts would be published, sold, adapted, or used in future royal communications. The boundary was finally clear. With the public argument finally stripped of speculation, only one verdict remained: what William's refusal had truly protected, and what it had permanently changed. In the end, the letters did not crown William as the faithful son, or condemn Harry as the rebellious one. They did not identify Meghan as a threat, nor did they offer the palace an easy absolution. Diana's words revealed something more painful and more human. Both sons had spent years using different forms of protection to survive the same loss. William guarded silence. Harry fought through exposure, and both had mistaken survival for loyalty. William's refusal was finally understood, not as an attempt to erase Meghan, but as a boundary against turning Diana's private pain into material for a modern royal conflict. Harry accepted that the letters belonged emotionally to both brothers, yet neither son possessed the right to release their mother's most vulnerable thoughts for public validation. Meghan faced a harder truth. She could identify with Diana's suffering, but that did not mean she owned Diana's story. The future king also admitted his own failure. By excluding Meghan without personally explaining his reasoning at the beginning, he had intensified the very suspicion he hoped to prevent. Harry carried that admission home, along with something more important. He told his wife that the letters contained no secret judgment capable of proving one side right. They carried only a warning that grief could be manipulated by everyone, including the people who believed they were protecting it. Meghan asked the question she had been holding back. Had William mentioned her by name while the brothers read? Harry answered no. Then he placed his hand over hers and said, "That was the point. This was never supposed to be about choosing between you." The words did not erase the hurt, but they stripped the conflict of its most dangerous illusion. Diana had not left behind a verdict against one woman or one son. She had left a plea for both brothers to stop turning pain into sides. William resealed the archive case after placing a jointly signed note inside. The note confirmed that both sons accepted permanent privacy protections, meaning the letters could be read privately, but never sold, published, or used as public ammunition. The brothers did not suddenly erase years of conflict. They did something quieter and more meaningful. They ended this crisis with one shared decision made as Diana's sons, rather than as opposing royal figures. The monarchy emerged chastened. Preserving history could not mean exploiting private suffering, and transparency could not justify exposing every intimate wound. The final verdict was clear. William's refusal denied Meghan access, but Diana's words denied everyone ownership. Her letters belonged neither to the palace nor to the Sussexes as weapons. They belonged to a mother's unfinished love for two sons. The case was closed, the letters were protected, and for once, Diana's memory did not pull William and Harry further apart. It brought them back to the same side of the table. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.